Welcome back to the Word on Fire Show. I'm Dr. Matthew Petrusik, Senior Director of the Word on Fire Institute and the host of the Word on Fire Show. Thank you for joining us. Today we're bringing you the first half of an hour-long conversation between Dr. Tod Worner and Bishop Robert Barron. In addition to practicing internal medicine as a physician, Dr. Tod, as we call him around here, is also the editor-in-chief of the Word on Fire Institute's Evangelization and Culture Journal. He also hosts the Evangelization and Culture podcast from the Word on Fire Institute. In this conversation, the two men discuss the meaning of beauty and its place in our lives. Is it subjective? Where does it sit amongst the other transcendentals, goodness and truth? Here to discuss these things with Dr. Tod Worner is Bishop Robert Barron.
Segment 1, the nature of beauty. In Book 1 of his sublime poem, Endymion, John Keats writes, quote, "A thing of beauty is a joy forever. Its loveliness increases. It will never pass into nothingness, but still will keep a bower quiet for us and a sleep full of sweet dreams and health and quiet breathing. Therefore, on every morrow, we are wreathing a flowery band to bind us to the earth, in spite of despondence, of the human dearth of noble natures, of the gloomy days, of all the unhealthy and overdarkened ways made for our searching. Yes, in spite of all, some shape of beauty moves away the pall from our dark spirits." Close quote. So Bishop Barron, John Keats.
Not bad, huh?
Not bad, right? I'm working on it on the side, but I'm not coming anywhere near that. John Keats is really saying something about beauty. He's saying it is lovely, it is eternal, and it comforts us in spite of our over-darkened ways. But what Keats doesn't say is what exactly beauty is. So let's just start this conversation about beauty. How would you define beauty?
I've always followed Thomas Aquinas, and I like the objectivity and the rationality of his definition. So Thomas says the beautiful occurs at the intersection of three things. In his Latin, integritas, consonantia, and claritas. You might render them as wholeness, harmony, and radiance. When those three things come together, we say, that's beautiful. Integritas, it exists as one thing. It's all the parts contribute to a unity. Consonantia, the parts are in harmonic relationship to each other. Claritas is in some ways the most elusive, but the most interesting. It means literally like light or shine or splendor. And in some texts, Aquinas will even say, like bright color. We tend to say, that's beautiful, you know. The trouble with that, of course, is, what about a Rembrandt painting? There's not much bright color.
Right.
So what he typically means, though, by claritas is the claritas formae, or the clarity of form. It's when the form of something shines forth. So that's all rather abstract, but when you get down to cases and say, now that's something beautiful, you see what he means. I'm a terrible golfer, but I like golf. And I love watching beautiful golf swings. And when you watch the pros, you can tell in a second, by the way. If you're watching a pro-am and they're showing like a player from a distance, you can tell in a second that's the amateur and that's the pro, because the pro swing has those three elements. It has integritas. It holds together as one, right? Everything contributes to the purpose of the swing. The elements that make it up, the takeaway, the breaking of the wrist, the shoulder turn, the hip turn, the downswing on plane, all those elements communicate with each other in a harmonious manner. And then that elusive claritas, when you say like, now that's a golf swing.
Yeah.
That's a golf swing. That's the claritas formae, right? The luminosity of form. What a beautiful catch. So someone stretches out for a foot and catches it, and you say, wow, what a beautiful catch that was. Well, then break it down. You'll find some version of integritas, consonantia, and claritas, right? So I like the objectivity of Aquinas' definition. It gets us away from simply whatever you think.
Right.
there are objective anchors we can point to.
What I like about this is it reminds me of, I don't know if it's Wordsworth or Whitman, I think it was Wordsworth that wrote the poem, What I Learned from the Learned Astronomer. And the astronomer basically unfolds the blackboard filled with mathematical equations and so on, and it's all analyses, and it's all just kind of working out problems. And he walks out bleary and somewhat despondent until he looks in the moist air, through the moist air at the night sky, and it's like he's rejuvenated again. So there is, like you said, there's the objective component of what Aquinas is saying in the trifecta you just mentioned, but then there's the visceral apprehension of it as well, if that's fair to say.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting problem to look at, because I think especially today we need to emphasize the objective, because we tend to be so subjective. However, you're quite right, because the same Aquinas, following Aristotle, will say whatever is received according to the mode of the recipient, the famous adage. But that's a very important point. Yeah. So something can be very beautiful, but I'm not attuned to it, right? I haven't been instructed yet.
Right.
I don't know the intricacies of it. No one's explained the pattern to me yet. I'm not going to see it. Or it's just not, I'm not kind of given naturally to that. That's not my thing. All right, that's the mode of the recipient, able to take in what it can. Or you might be able to appreciate the beautiful in a preliminary way, but then in time, more and more dimensions of it open up to you as you become more refined. So there is a subjective element. I remember it was a good instinct. This buddy of mine, we were Basilian students at Catholic U. We were both like 20 years old. And there was some special deal for students that we got a cut rate to go to the Kennedy Center, like once a month, subscription thing. I remember going to the Kennedy Center, and Mstislav Rostropovich, who was the greatest cellist in the world at the time, and he was the conductor, I think, part-time for the orchestra there. He would perform regularly. I'm 20 years old. What do I know about classical music? But I would go, and I didn't really get it. And look, I was raised on rock and roll, and rock and roll can be very beautiful too, but that's what I knew was like pop music. And to sit there at the Kennedy Center, age 20, and Rostropovich is playing some high-level classical piece. Yeah. I didn't get it, and I would get distracted, and we're the drums and the rhythm guitar, and But thank God, by a good instinct, I went there, and it began my education in classical music. And then I buy a record. Oh, I heard that. I'm going to go buy that record. Record in those days, the big vinyl. And I started listening, and so then I was able to take in more and more of classical music. When in the beginning, the temptation would be to say, "Oh, I don't like that. It's not my thing. I don't like that." Okay, fair enough. You don't like it because maybe you're incapable of it. You don't get the integritas, consonantia, and claritas of that. But you will in time if you're properly trained.
This is, I know we've talked about this story before. This is the Jesuit priest teaching Anton Scalia Shakespeare, and the 15-year-old kid who's in his class that's complaining the whole time. And the Jesuit priest looks at him and says, when you all read Shakespeare, Shakespeare's not on trial, you are.
That's right.
And to your point, I like the notion that there's something that can be objectively beautiful, and yet your mode, is, if you will, has not arrived to a place where you can apprehend or understand or appreciate the beauty in the way you're describing. It isn't that it isn't beautiful. It isn't that it's not on trial, you are, to some extent.
I'll give you an example, again, from sports. So I taught a lot of kids over the years at Mundelein who are from Africa, Asia, Latin America. Well, they're attuned not to our sports like baseball, but to soccer.
Right.
And I used to say in class, look, guys, I'll admit it, I don't understand soccer. I find it exceptionally dull game to watch. Well, they'd react, of course, and they'd say, dull. What about baseball? I said, oh, baseball. And I meant it.
Yeah.
Baseball's brilliant. Baseball's wonderful, and there's so much to see. But and I would acknowledge that. I say, look, we're just talking past it, because I was raised on baseball. I was taught baseball by my dad, and then I played baseball, and I had coaches, and I watched the game of the week every Saturday, and I listened to announcers, and I learned what to watch for. And I said, I admit it, with soccer, I don't know. To me, it's the field's too big, and the ball just goes over there, and there's no scoring, and they would say, oh, no, but you got to watch for,
Yeah.
I said, I know, I get it. You were raised in that sport, so you can appreciate its beauty in a way that I can't.
Right. So Bishop, truth, goodness, and beauty are considered transcendentals.
Yeah.
So what is a transcendental, and why does beauty qualify for being deemed as such?
Yeah, it's a very important theme in classical philosophy. It just means it's something that applies to being as such, so it transcends any particularity. So this thing is, you are, the chair is, God is. So they would all have those qualities, right, of goodness, truth, and beauty. They would transcend any categorical or particular dimension. They apply to being as such. That's why they're transcendental. All being is true, meaning it has some intelligibility that will appeal to the inquiring mind. Aquinas will say that form, so call it structure or intelligibility, form is the bearer of esse. It's a very interesting observation that form makes something to be. See? That exists only because it's matter in this intelligible form, right? And so, therefore, anything that is, from a little tiny insect to a molecule to God, whatever is true, because it has objective intelligibility that appeals to the subjective intellect. Secondly, whatever is good because it appeals to the will. There's something in whatever is, the will recognizes something desirable. I want union with that. I want to be one with that thing and understand it better. And Thomas will say the good is simply being apprehended as desirable. Once you make that move, the will is awakened. See, it's very interesting. That's the goodness as such awakens the will. Okay, so truth, goodness, and then finally beauty. Whatever is splendid in some way. And now we go back to our three elements. But whatever is shines forth with an attractive splendor. Right? Let's put it that way.
Right.
Now, I'm with D.C. Schindler here, who was once in this room. We had a wonderful conversation. He says that of the three, beauty is maybe the first. Now, why? Because it's so visceral. It's what we first notice.
Right.
And only see when something gets your attention as beautiful, do you then say, oh, and my mind appreciates the form, the intelligibility of it. It's true. And my will now has an appetite for it. It's good.
Right.
But the first move is it's got to get your attention. That's why Balthasar, of course, whom Schindler's relying on there, says it's the smile of the mother that awakens a child to being. And it's such a peculiar statement, but I think it's dead right. The older I get, the more I think it's right. In other words, take a little baby, and the little baby is looking up into the face of his mother, and the mother smiles. Well, what does the baby recognize? Something beautiful. Yeah. And that opens the baby to being. Right, to the world. And the world not as something threatening, but as something enticing to the mind and to the will. But what came first was the beautiful. Yeah. The beautiful came first. And there's a lot to that. I think when, like a parent says, hey, look at that. To a baby, look at that. And only when you look at it, and that now, do you understand what that thing is all about? And you see how good that thing is? But what came first was look. Yeah. You know? And that's the subjective state corresponding to the objective splendor.
Right.
That's why the beautiful maybe comes first.
And we're going to talk as we go along about leading with beauty, also beauty as the arrowhead of evangelization.
Yeah.
But I know this is the beginnings, the intimations of that kind of concept also.
Yeah.
Bishop, a forgotten architect of England's sublime Glastonbury Abbey remarked, quote, "I wish to create a church so beautiful that it would move even the hardest heart to prayer," close quote. There is something visceral about beauty that moves us at our deepest, even subconscious level. Notwithstanding the objectivity of beauty, what is it about the beautiful that tingles the spine, quickens the heart, takes the breath away?
It's just what we were talking about. And I go back here all the time to James Joyce and the Portrait of the Artist, that famous scene where he describes the woman standing out in the surf. And it's actually the woman that he married, Nora Barnacle, but it's fictionalized in that book. But he looks at her, and it's brilliantly done because he's articulating the three elements of the beautiful. He sees her silhouetted by the sea. Bob Dylan, by the way, picks up that line. That's the Tambourine Man, silhouetted by the sea. Because only when it's silhouetted could he see her as one, right? Integritas. Then what he does in that description is her hair and her face and her shoulders and her hips and the way the seaweed winds around her leg, and he describes all the elements that makes her up. Consonantia, right? And then she turns to him, and he says, in quiet sufferance of his gaze. It's very interesting because that's the, hey, look, she suffers his gaze. She allows herself to be seen. Splendor, right? And then what does he say? Stephen Dedalus, the narrator, says, "Oh, heavenly God." And that's, I think, the pivotal moment in that book, because the beautiful has affected him viscerally, right? But also from the guts, the viscera, from the guts to God, right? Oh, heavenly God, because that's the move, goes back to Plato, comes out through Dante. It's basic in our tradition, that the particular beautiful opens you to the source of beauty, right?
Yes.
And see, also the thing with the sea, he's playing with the Diotima speech in the Symposium of Plato, when she talks about moving from the particular person, beautiful, and then to institutions, and then to, she goes out, and then she talks about looking out to the open sea of the beautiful itself. Well, that's why Joyce has this scene where she's there silhouetted by the open sea.
Right.
It's if you have the imagination, this glass, this probably Waterford, right? Speaking of Ireland, if you got the right imagination, this glass, oh heavenly God, right, leads you to God. And that's, again, beauty coming first. First he sees her. There she is. There she is. And then he does the analysis of integritas, consonantia, claritas. And then he's ready for God, And because what happens to Stephen right after that, he was thinking about becoming a priest. That was on the young Joyce's mind too at one point. That's not for him. But he becomes a priest of the beautiful. He says, now my vocation, remember the book's called The Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. His vocation, he said, is to report epiphanies. What's an epiphany? When the beautiful opens up to the source of beauty. And that's what Joyce did the rest of his life, as he reported epiphanies. So that's how it works, I think, in our tradition.
Very good. I want to turn to Joseph Pieper. Joseph Pieper, obviously an incredible writer, philosopher who influenced Benedict XVI and others. What Joseph Pieper says about leisure can, in my opinion, be applied to beauty. So I'm going to juxtapose beauty in the place of his words leisure. This is quoting Joseph Pieper. The point and justification of beauty are not that the functionary, that is the worker, should function faultlessly and without a breakdown, but that the functionary, the worker, should continue to be a man. And that means that he should not be wholly absorbed in the clear-cut milieu of his strictly limited function. The point is also that he should retain the faculty of grasping the world as a whole and realizing his full potentialities as an entity meant to reach. Wholeness is what man strives for. So, Bishop, is beauty, this is kind of getting to the point, is beauty a means to an end? Is it a tool to be used to kind of sort of salve our wretched existence here so we keep doing the work we need to do? Or can beauty be an end in and of itself?
Well, it has to be. If it's one of the marks of being, then it's something that's sought for its own sake. Now, Pieper, that quote you had there is really interesting, because he's talking there about what he calls the philosophical act. The philosophical act is what transcends the workaday consciousness. So there's the workaday. I had to get in my car this morning and drive over here and know where to park and how to get up to this floor. And fine, that's the ordinary workaday consciousness. And then when I finish this, I got to go somewhere else. And that's why we get through the day. And we all have that. But there has to be, Pieper thought, and leisure gives rise to it, is the philosophical act, which is not looking at particular categorical things and how they're useful to me, but looking at what characterizes being as such. That's the idea of the whole. It doesn't mean I'm going to bring every little thing in the universe before my consciousness for explicit meditation. It means I'm aware of that which unites all things, namely being. Think of Jacques Maritain when he says metaphysics begin with the intuition into being. It means I know these beings and I can make my way practically through the world of beings. But then there's this moment when, what does it mean to be? Heidegger calls it the Frage nach dem Sein, right? The question after being. That's a very interesting moment, because either you get that or you don't. If you don't get it, you live in the world of ordinary consciousness. You're in the cave, to use Plato's language. To get it is to become a philosopher. And see, that's why in Plato, he was so right about this. People on the ship were just rolling it. They look at the captain, what is that bozo doing looking up at the stars? Let's throw him overboard. He's useless. Ah, yes, he is, because he's actually governing the ship. He's looking up at the forms, it'd be Plato's thing. But for somebody like Pieper, there needs to be someone who looks at the nature of being. What does it mean to be? Yeah. What unites all things in their coherency? And then if you have an intuition to being, what will you know? Truth, goodness, and beauty, right? And Plato correctly said, those are the people that should be governing society. The trouble is, we throw them overboard. We think they're useless. And indeed, they are useless. And that's the point of the philosophical act. It's a useless act because it's contemplative. It's not subordinated to a goal outside of itself. It's sought for its own sake. And see, it's so rare in our pragmatic culture.
Yeah.
It's very rare to find that. You have to be trained in it. And it's like almost like a monastic discipline.
Yeah.
And indeed, in Plato, we think of someone going to university to study philosophy. For Plato, it was more like a monastery. You were going to enter into a form of life, and you were going to go through a series of practices that would open you to a different dimension of being. That sounds like religious language to us, and indeed it really was to Plato, right? And Pieper, from Plato to Pieper is trying to recover that, because he was living in a Europe that had, let's say in the West, that had largely squandered that tradition and had given in to the technocratic mentality, right?
Yeah.
To use someone like Guardini, who was an influence on Pieper, the technocratic modernity that's pragmatic and wants to make things work better. Great. But unless you got somebody asking die Frage nach dem Sein, you're not going to know what to do with your technological know-how. In fact, what you're going to do with it is build atomic bombs and gas chambers. Yeah. See, the trouble is, if you're not governed by some moral vision, there's the good, right? Some epistemological vision, the true, some aesthetic vision, the beautiful, you're going to make a very ugly, dangerous society. That, to me, is a very relevant critique even today.
You know what's interesting is, especially with Pope Leo XIV, I've been recently wrote something with respect to something that George Bernanot wrote after World War II. And there's also a book by Alan Jacobs called The Year of Our Lord, 1943. All of these talk about
that's
these.
a good book.
Yeah, there was T.S. Eliot and Simone Weil and others that are basically, all these people are warning of the technocracy that grows out of our advancements, our progress, and so on, and that we look at this as an unalloyed good, but in fact, in many respects, it can distract us from the very contemplative type of life you're discussing.
And what was the opening quote? Was that the Goethe or Keats? The one about
Goethe, yeah.
Goethe, every day you should look at a picture. Every day you should listen to a song. See, and I know this sounds like dilettantism, or it sounds like, oh, this effete, aristocratic mentality. But no, that's basic human common sense.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to be useless, you'll be useful to nobody. Yeah. And that's the philosophical act. But that has to be cultivated and disciplined. And Plato saw it a long time ago. I know most people will see it as a waste of time, but it has to be cultivated. That's why, I've been going on for years about the liberal arts and their importance. It drives me crazy that these, even Catholic schools, let's get rid of our liberal arts programs. Well, then close. Yeah. Because the whole point of that is to cultivate this mentality and have people that know how to ask the question after being. If you don't, we're all going to be in serious trouble. We'll make great cell phones and we'll get places faster, but we won't know what to do once we get there. And then we'll start doing very dangerous things because we'll be indulging our passions and the worst of our psychology, unless we're guided by something like a moral vision. See, that's why it's as relevant today as it was when Plato was writing.
Right. So turning to Evelyn Waugh's Bridehead
my favorite Catholic novel of the 20th century.
The religiously uncertain artist in this novel, Charles Ryder, found himself instantly enchanted by the sublime artistry and the soaring architecture of Brideshead. And Charles finds himself engaged in a discussion on the nature of the estate's chapel with his friend Sebastian's elder brother, Bridie. So Bridie is the older brother, lives at Brideshead, or was born out of Brideshead. Charles Ryder is the religiously uncertain visitor to this place. And so Bridie says, "You're an artist, Ryder. what do you think of it aesthetically, this chapel? Sebastian's younger sister, Cordelia, with tears in her eyes, says, I think it's beautiful. Bridie says, is it good art? Charles warily says, well, I don't quite know what you mean. I think it's a remarkable example of its period. Probably in 80 years, it will be greatly admired. But surely, Bridie asked, it can't be good 20 years ago and good in 80 years and not good now. Well, it may be good now, Charles answered. All I mean is that I don't happen to like it much. Bridie finishes saying, but is there a difference between liking a thing and thinking it good? Now, from this reading, Bridie's questions kind of were my own.
Yeah, right.
And there's two questions here. Number one, is beauty just in the eye of the beholder? And we talked about this a little bit about the objective nature of beauty and the mode a person, the recipient of it is. So you can maybe say a word or two more about that. And secondly, can something be beautiful today and not tomorrow? Is beauty ephemeral or is it eternal?
Yeah, no, again, we're playing on that objective-subjective divide a bit there. But it's a very interesting conversation, isn't it? Because, and Wall was so good on so many levels in that book, but one of them is, Brideshead, the manor house, is symbolic of the church, I think. Christ is head of his bride, the church, and all that. And Ryder is, as you say, this sort of agnostic outsider. He's attracted to his friend Sebastian, of course, interesting name there, who brings him to Brideshead. And Charles he's taken by the gorgeous beauty of the architecture. That's a particular chapel inside they're talking about. But the first thing that starts leading him toward the church is the beauty of the church. And only in time in that book does he come to, I'd say, the goodness and the truth of the church. But it begins with the beautiful there. But that discussion is very interesting to me because I think it's okay to say, yeah, that's objectively beautiful. It's just not quite my thing. And that's okay. Meaning, whatever. I'm not disposed to it properly, or even, I just like other things better.
Yeah.
It's like taste in music. You can say, sure, I admire that piece of music. I understand it's good. It's not really my thing. There could be all kinds of subjective reasons for that, right? Or it could be, I'll take an example of my own life. So my parents, I always think of there's a watershed in the 20th century, which is like Elvis, like the late 50s, that just really divides people. So my parents were clearly on the pre-Elvis side of the divide. So my mother loved music. My father really didn't. My mother loved music, but it was big band, and it was Frank Sinatra, and it was that world.
Right.
Well, I grew up on the other side of the Elvis divide, and I'm with the Beatles and the Stones and the Who and Van Morrison, and like when I was a kid, Sinatra, no idea. To me it was like, oh come on. And I remember like as a kid watching the Ed Sullivan Show, my mother was like, Judy Garland is on it. She's singing. And I'm like, Judy Garland. Bore me to tears with Judy Garland. Well, look, I was completely non-disposed to it at that point. Later in life, so when I'm in my late 20s, I remember, I forget how it happened, but somehow a Sinatra record comes into my life. And I was just ready for it.
Yeah.
I was ready for it. And it was like, I've never heard a voice like that. Because rock and roll voices, some of them are quite fine, but mostly it's like screaming.
Yeah.
Because it's not the voice so much, it's the rhythm, it's the
right.
But then Sinatra, and he sounds like a cello, and like what? And then the phrasing and the expressiveness, and then those big band arrangements, which are like really almost symphonic. Some of them, it was like it just blew my mind open. Okay, I was ready. I was ready. But when I was 22, I guess. My mom likes him. I guess he's great, but I don't get it. So I get that in that conversation with Bridie here of like, I'm just maybe not ready. It's not my thing. But that doesn't really tell against the objectivity of it.
Right.
Sinatra was always wonderful, even when I was clueless about Sinatra. Just as Rostropovich is wonderful when I was a 20-year-old clueless about classical music. So that's okay. That's the subjective, objective thing. But here's the point. The point is, don't surrender. And boy, do we have it today in spades. Don't surrender to this, lordship of autonomy. It's all about your subjectivity. No, train subjectivity. Take subjectivity and introduce it to the world of objective value.
Right.
And teach someone what to love. Think of Augustine. It's all about love. It's the direction of our loves. What do you love? Well, A little baby loves certain things, but then you want to move the baby to higher and higher types of love, right? The trouble now, we're stuck at baby consciousness, like, oh no, whatever you want, whatever you want.
Yeah.
And that's bad for babies, by the way. Any parent, whatever you want, give me a break. No, you want to direct love in the right way. So bring the subjective, which is kind of this, tabula rasa, bring it into line with objective value. Tell someone why that chapel at Bryce, tell why it is so beautiful. It was a Baroque chapel, I remember, in the book. And I'm a Gothic guy. I was sort of trained on Gothic, and I first got into it through Gothic. And to this day, I much prefer it to the Baroque. But I remember the day when, this years ago, someone began explaining Baroque to me. Like, oh, okay. All right. Now I still prefer Notre Dame to St. Peter's.
Sure.
I do. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. I prefer it. I can appreciate the objective beauty of both, And it was helpful when someone explained to me, here's how Baroque works. Or I remember Cardinal George years ago, when he was a younger man, and someone showed him Caravaggio's famous conversion of Paul, where Paul's on the ground with his arms up in the air. But there's the composition is dominated by the horse.
Yeah.
In fact, the back end of the horse. Yeah. And the horse is looking around like this to Paul, right? And the cardinal said, he told his friend, he said, it's all horse. I don't get it. And then his friend, who was a Caravaggio man, began to explain the play of light and dark and the way the composition was. And then I think, from a spiritual standpoint, the dominance of the horse is very important. That Paul was on that horse, moving, and then he's knocked off of it, and he realizes he's been a bit of a horse's ass.
Yeah. I was waiting for that.
No, but it's true. It dominates the composition.
Yep.
And then he is there blinded on the ground.
Right.
So in other words, my point is, all of that's going on, I think, in that Caravaggio painting. But you need someone to help you see it.
Yeah.
And then open up your consciousness in that direction.
I'll just say this briefly. When I'm teaching medical students and residents, I bring in literature, Dostoevsky, Jane Austen, Shakespeare. And I always kid and say, how many of you read Hamlet in 9th grade or Romeo and Juliet? Everybody raised their hand, and I said, that means you didn't really read it.
Right.
And I tease because they do need some exposure, but the problem is so many people they find a distaste, like you said. They're not in the mode where they appreciate the objective goodness or beauty of it, and they never come back to it again.
Right.
And if somebody saying to you, listen, don't walk away, trust me on this, come back at it later on with more experience, more insight, more maturity, and to your point, I think you said it before, you kind of can arrive. But only if you come back to it at a later stage.
You need mentors. You need mentors. Like my dad teaching me baseball. Do you see that? See what he did there? See that double play? You see how he flipped to the. That's how it happens. Or I told this story recently about my little league coach. All right, boys, get down on the ground. I want you to feel the infield. I want you to, because he wanted us not to be afraid of the ground.
Yes,
we had to get down there and get the ball.
Yes.
And it would slide into the base. So you just get to feel the, smell the field.
Right.
You need mentors. But the trouble today, I know I sound like an old man now. I am an old man. But, oh no, whatever you want.
Yeah.
That is poison to the soul.
Yeah.
But every movie preaches it. Every song preaches it. It's whatever you want. Yeah. Who am I to tell you what to do? It's up to you. You choose. Your decision. Poison. Put kids on a baseball field. Do whatever you want.
Yeah, right.
Off you go. They'll be miserable in seconds. They'll be fighting in a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Anyone's ever dealt with kids knows that. There's a museum. Just go in there and look around. Hey, there's Hamlet. Just pick it up and read it. Come on. Have a great mentor that has moved through Hamlet 100 times and knows it and knows that it corresponds to almost every feeling human beings have ever had.
Yes.
And it's expressed in a way that no one's ever expressed before. Recite it to people. Show them different versions of it, that's the task of our time. And all that's got to be done by people that know how to ask die Frage nach dem Sein. If all you got is technocrats, technicians, and they know how to, I'll admit it, I can't turn the darn TV on. I get the TV. I'm not joking, I need 2 Word on Fire tech people to set up the TV. That's talk for another day. So I get it. I love that, the people that know how to do that. But if that's all we have, we're in serious trouble. Right. And let's go right back to Pieper there. And it's leisure, it's culture, it's Dietrich von Hildebrand. It's moving out of the merely subjectively satisfying into the objectively valuable.
Yes.
That's the move to the beautiful. That's the escape from the cave. See, we've known all this forever. But I do think for different reasons we've forgotten it. You know, it's interesting. Just last night I was watching a podcast with Rusty Reno, and he's talking about his book, The Return of the Strong Gods. And he's scoring there Karl Popper, who writes this massively influential, The Open Society and Its Enemies, right? And his theory, which I think is very compelling, his theory is Popper's writing, after the cataclysm of the Second World War and Auschwitz.
Yeah.
Where did it come from? It came from people with these strong convictions and that believed in these things. And so the trouble is nationalism, and the trouble is conviction. And so what we need is this open society and all different viewpoints, and no one's got the answer. Well, I get it. I get where that feeling came from. But see, that's given rise to our culture now.
Right.
So we're all kind of adrift, and no one's for anything. It's up to you, my private opinion, your private opinion. Let's just tolerate each other, And then we get our slothful society.
Yeah,
right.
That does it for us today. Thanks for joining us on the Word on Fire show. If you're interested in learning more about how Word on Fire can help you grow closer to Christ, become a better evangelist with and for others, and work for the common good, consider joining the Word on Fire Institute. Check us out at institute.wordonfire.org. That's institute.wordonfire.org. We'll see you next time. God bless and protect you.